than using the thing, really looking to just pay attention to what is actually happening in experience. Rather than predominantly sort of doing or directing the mind, it's receptive. So it's that the Buddha made this distinction between practices where we direct the mind to a particular end and meditation practices where the mind is undirected. It's quite open, it's quite receptive, and it's, if you like, the mind or awareness chooses its own objects, and there can be quite a number of them rather than just a particular focus, usually one focus, for example, on the breath. And it's also an approach that emphasizes wisdom. It emphasizes clear seeing. So the main building blocks, I would say, are mindfulness or awareness, and I'll probably use both words quite interchangeably, and wisdom, a Dharma perspective, or right view. Can talk about it in any of those ways. Yeah, in a less formal way, I talk about it as a practice of watching the mind, watching what's happening in the mind, and by extension through all of the senses. The mind you can know whatever's happening through each of the 5 physical senses, but also the mind sense. And the mind sense goes way beyond the thinking mind. It's the mind that feels, that perceives, that decides, that knows, and that's aware. Awareness itself is clearly a feature or a capacity of the mind sense. So I want to say just a couple of things to locate this practice within our Triratna model of practice in 2 ways. So one is that we have the mindfulness of breathing, Metta main practices, and then we have just sitting. So this more receptive approach is very much akin to just sitting. Sometimes some of you will have heard me say it's just sitting with bells on. So it's just sitting that has more pointers, if you like. It points to more aspects of experience to notice, to be aware of. So that's one way through the just sitting practice. And then the other way is through what we call the mandala of practice. And for those of you that aren't familiar with that, this is a mandala of qualities or practices, or qualities is better. So integration, positive emotion, spiritual receptivity, spiritual death, and spiritual rebirth. So out of those 5, I would say that 2 are particularly relevant to the practice I'm going to be introducing. So one is clearly spiritual receptivity. That's the method. That's the way in which we're looking to be aware, looking to be mindful. And the other one, which is in a way is also fairly obvious, is spiritual depth, because another way of talking about spiritual depth is insight or wisdom. So those are the 2 main qualities, and receptivity as the method, and spiritual depth more as the where the practice is going, where it's heading. But of course, along the way, the mind becomes more integrated, and positive emotion is naturally sort of cultivated and developed through bringing more awareness into our experience. So that's the Triratna context. So I want to talk about probably, if I have time, 4 things about mindfulness. And I'm drawing these, as I said, from the 2nd chapter which is called How We Are Aware. So it's less concerned with what we're aware of or what we're mindful of. That comes later. I think that is the chapter after that, chapter 3. But actually what's more important is the quality of the mind that is aware. And the Buddha defined right mindfulness, the 4 particular qualities that make up right mindfulness. So I'm going to talk about those, not in particularly traditional terms. The meaning is traditional, but what I've called them is not so traditional in the context of this evening. In the book, you get the traditional bit as well. So the first thing, really simple, mindfulness always happens in the present moment. So you can be aware right now, just kind of settling back, relaxing back into your posture, to how you're sitting. Notice what you're aware of. There might be particular sounds that the mind picks up. Perhaps the posture of your body on the chair or the cushion, certain movements in the body, all these things we can know in a very simple way, and we know them in the present moment. So perhaps throughout the evening you can keep touching back in with that if you find that you've lost that sense of being present to what's happening. Oh, relax back into that. So we're not trying to change anything or make experience be any different to what it is. Not trying to feel any different, not trying to have a different experience of the breath, a different experience of the body or whatever thoughts are going through your head. We're just looking to know it as it is, as it happens. So very simple. And we look to do that with a relaxed, spacious and natural quality of mind. So that's it. That's the first point. It's mindfulness always happens in the present moment. We may have thoughts about the future. We may have memories arising in relation to the past, but we can be aware of them in the present moment. So the second point is to do the quality of effort and the quality of energy that we use. I'd say it's crucial, the quality of effort. And I think it's important to, in this type of practice, I'd say we need to use the minimum effort that we can and still be present. So that might sound a little bit counterintuitive. Actually, we're really looking to pull back on a tendency for the mind to sort of, for us to throw ourselves into something. We can still be wholehearted, but we can have this sort of relaxed, open quality to the effort that we're using. I'm going to do a little exercise that some of you will be familiar with, just to demonstrate this. So if you'd like to put your hands, put them, I'm going to hold mine up so they can definitely see them. They definitely appear in the camera, but you can have yours a bit lower if you like. You can relax your hands so that they're supported in your lap. But put your tips and your edges of your palms together. And make and break that contact just every now and again. Feel into the sensations of the palms and the fingers touching. And then perhaps when you put them apart, maybe there's also some sensations there as well. So maybe just doing that a few times. And as you're present, as you're in the present moment, notice if it takes, well, does anyone think it takes a lot of energy to be aware? Let your hands go. No, I can see a few shakes. Anyone think it takes a lot of energy? Know those sensations. Can't see what anybody's doing online. Nobody's nodding. Nobody's nodding. Is anyone shaking their heads? No. Okay. A bit more feedback required. Does anyone think it takes a very small amount of effort to be aware of what's happening? Yes. Yeah. Anything online? No. Are you there? So that is generally the response, is that it actually takes very little energy to be aware, and that's a very simple example, just sensations. So in meditation, that little exercise can be something of a touchstone, just to come back to and remind ourselves, we don't need to do all this trying hard, all this putting a bit of welly in, but actually simply relaxing into awareness. And what we're aiming for with that quality of awareness is a continuity. If we put loads of energy in, then the mind gets tired quite quickly and the body gets tense. Well, so what we're looking to do is have a very small amount of energy, but applied really, really regularly. And that can happen through just remembering or reminding ourselves to be present. So one of the benefits of a continuity of awareness is that we catch ourselves when hindrances arise, hindrances to meditation arise, or what we can call afflictive emotions, when manifestations of various sort of unskillful states of mind. And Bhante Sangha, our founder, he says something like, a consistent practice of mindfulness outside of meditation will do far more to overcome hindrances than anything we do once we get on the cushion. We're meditating for what, 40, 50 minutes a day, most of us. So we've got, the rest of our lives for the mind to go a bit wild. But if we're practicing mindfulness, moment to moment mindfulness, then we can notice those afflictive emotions, those hindrances, really quite soon after they arise. So the more continuity, the better. So one thing that sometimes comes up as a question, as opposed to do's, and I think can make us maybe try a bit harder, or try and force things a bit, is to do with when there seems to be a lot happening, when things are happening a bit too fast, and we can think, oh, I can't be aware of this, there's too much going on. But actually the mind is very fast. And I've had numerous sort of occasions where I've seen this in my own experience. But the one that I've seen quite regularly is when I used to come to Birmingham to Symphony Hall for concerts there. And I've only been to one since lockdown. And often there'd be classical pieces of music, quite often a pianist, and the pianist would be playing, and they'd have this great big, they'd have the orchestra around them, but they would be the sort of solo instrument within it. And they would play an incredible number of notes within a very short period of time, within a few minutes, probably thousands of notes in a particular piece. So in a way, what they do with their hands is one thing, and that's really amazing. But actually what we do with our minds is that we can be able to hear. I found I was able to hear every note that was played if I was present. That was all it took, to be present with the attention just resting on hearing what was being heard. So actually the mind is very fast, and it can attend to a lot of, with a lot of speed and a lot of accuracy, without loads and loads of effort. One more thing around this, racing through it a bit, I feel like. I think it's really important with energy and effort that there's some degree of interest and curiosity, emotional engagement. In the Mindfulness in Schools project, which it's a course often addressed to teenagers in school. They talk about David Attenborough mind. They have this whole thing, and they show clips of David Attenborough doing his thing in the wild somewhere, or in nature somewhere. And it's because he has this quality of interest, this quality of wonder in whatever he sees. It doesn't need to be special, it doesn't need to be beautiful, it doesn't need to be anything. He's just really interested in what's happening. And that's the sort of, or even a tiny bit of that, actually, if we can apply that to what's happening within our experience of body-mind, our experience through the senses. I think that interest can take us a long way. So that emotional engagement is really important. It's more a sense of sort of feeling awareness rather than doing awareness, feeling into present moment. So the third quality, Sangha actually talked about awareness being revolutionary, which I think is true. I also think that acceptance is revolutionary, and this is the third quality. So acceptance of what is happening within our experience brings contentment and brings happiness to the mind. I think acceptance is a wisdom quality, actually. Particularly when there are things in our experience that we don't want to be there. Something's unpleasant, it's unwanted in some way, it's difficult. And the ability to just be willing to be with what's happening, not resisting experience as it's happening. And that takes a whole level of the unpleasantness away from it. If we can think, okay, this is what's happening right now. This is how it is. Can I be with this without resistance? Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. But I think it can help just to remember that possibility. In more traditional terms, Buddhist terms, we talk about this as the second arrow. We're not adding extra suffering to what's already a difficult situation. So I've talked about a particular situation in the book where I'm working with going to the dentist and having implant surgery, which wasn't very pleasant. But this is maybe just to mention that at the end of each chapter, I've got what I call mindful life moments. And some of you will know that I write a blog. I've written a blog for 5 or 6 years. And I try and write about something about how I practice. And mainly the episodes, the writing episodes are drawn from daily life, because that's often where the learning is. The practice on the cushion is really important, but the learning often happens within the midst of my life. Hence the implant surgery visit to the dentist. But more recently, I had another experience that was quite challenging, and this was went camping with my partner for a few days recently, and we went for a long walk. And for about, I'd say about half a mile, we were, well, I was, he wasn't so much, but we were basically hounded by horseflies. And I ended up, I don't know if you know, horseflies are particularly unpleasant, and yeah, they bite you and then they sort of stick to you, and then your skin swells up in a very unpleasant sort of way. So I had about a dozen bites by the time that we'd sort of got to where we sort of basically got past an altitude that they were comfortable with. So we basically sort of outwalked them. Wasn't that high, but yeah. But my partner and I started talking about it because I kept sort of, well, it wasn't quite a shriek, but it was a yelp every time. Like I sort of caught one sort of on me. It was a yelp, and there was trying to get them off, trying to brush them off, but really sort of not very smooth and not very sort of calmly. So my partner and I were talking about the practice and trying to. I thought, what's my aim here? My aim is to try and be more mindful of what's happening here. I didn't feel particular resistance, but I wanted to see if I could manage to just be more present, and then what would happen. And I think on the last 3 or so bites, I did manage. I managed not to sort of slack away, because I was concerned that I was going to injure some of them. I didn't want that. But also the yelping seemed to make it all worse. It all made it all sort of a bit more of a bigger deal. So the last 3, I managed not to slap, and I managed not to yelp, and consider this work well done. Basically, it was an unpleasant experience. It was happening, but it didn't sort of define the moment. It didn't define the walk for that period of time. Despite all the, you know, I mean, I was constantly sort of checking like this, checking around to see where they were landing. We did manage to take a photo, and I sent it to a friend, and she was saying, wow, you look so happy in this photo. And I was happy. So just goes to show, doesn't it? You can be having quite an unpleasant experience, or part of your experience is quite unpleasant, but it doesn't have to define other things that are happening as well. We're in a really beautiful place. You can see the sea, the sun shining. Yeah. So acceptance of what is happening leads to happiness, allows contentment and happiness to be present. So the 4th thing, maybe I'll just recap on what the others were. So awareness in the present moment. If you've lost that connection with the present moment, you can reconnect with it. The quality of effort is crucial, and acceptance is revolutionary. And then the 4th one. The 4th one is relating to experience as experience. What is the mind knowing? So it's the ability to look a bit more objectively about what's happening in our experience. And the wisdom dimension, I think, also comes in quite strongly here. The Buddha had a lovely image when he talked about mindfulness and wisdom. And he talked about the elephant, and yeah, there were lots of elephants around in his time in India, so it was something that people would have been able to relate to. So he said the neck of the elephant was sati, mindfulness, he compared that, and the head of the elephant was wisdom or panya, pranya. So the neck supports the head, which it does physically. And the head of the elephant is a big thing. It's a big thing to support. But yeah, the mindfulness supports wisdom. I think sometimes in our experience, we can have an experience of mindfulness, sati, and at other times we can have, and we can cultivate experiences of satipanya, awareness, wisdom. This is a compound term that's used in the early Buddhist teaching. So I want to maybe just give a couple of examples of perhaps the difference between being mindful and being mindful, but with this stronger wisdom dimension. And basically it means that we're able to see a bit more deeply into what's happening and have something of an understanding through that, seeing more deeply. So we might be mindful of, let's say it's the breath. So mindful of the sensations of the breath. Perhaps the fact that if we're breathing in a shallow way, or the breath is quite deep, we can know these things quite easily, really. And a number of other things we can know about the breath. And we can be mindful. So sati is present. But if we're aware with some degree of wisdom, and I think wisdom can manifest in many different ways, then we might just have some understanding in that moment about the nature of the breath. That might be that the breath is conditioned. It's conditioned by so many sort of factors in our body, sort of keeping that breath going. So it might be an insight around conditionality, or the conditioned nature of things. It might come in the form of something like just knowing in a moment that this breath has never been breathed before. So this is quite ordinary. This is quite an ordinary, but actually the feeling of it can be quite extraordinary, to just realize this breath has never been breathed before, and the one that follows it is the same. So that's maybe just a couple of little ways that that we can have some understanding or some insight into quite ordinary experiences, very everyday experiences, but the quality of mind that's aware of them is very different. Another way I think that the insight dimension or Dharma perspective comes in might be when we're aware. Okay, say that aware of sensations, we're aware of sitting in meditation and aware of sensations of clothing, touching, skin, maybe you've got a bit of an ache in your back or your knee, the various sort of sensations through the tactile body that we can know, we can be mindful of. One of the ways that mindfulness with wisdom, so satipanya, can manifest is through being aware of that relationship to the body sensation, perhaps to an uncomfortable body sensation. So maybe we become aware that there's some resistance to that, there's some aversion in the mind. And that's the way that we're relating to what's happening. We're not actually aware of it. We're annoyed by it, or we're resistant to it. And that resistance will be impacting the experience. It will be fueling the difficultness or the painfulness of that experience. But we become aware of it. as simply another thing to be aware. Oh, this aversion in the mind. What does that feel like? What's that experience like? So whatever happens in the experience, we can become aware of it. And then maybe one last example. So this is to do with perhaps we're aware of thoughts. We're looking to be aware of our thoughts. And often we can know roughly, we can know that we're thinking. And usually we've got some awareness of what we're thinking. Even if we sort of half look back, we can think, oh yeah, I was thinking about that. So there's a degree of mindfulness there. Mindfulness with that wisdom component would be more, well, it would be less interested in the content, in knowing what was being thought about. And it would be more able to really know in the moment a thought as a thought, what a thought feels like in the mind. And again, to know, if you like, not to be identified with that thought as these are my thoughts that I'm involved with. It's simply a thought arising in the mind, in the moment. So it's just a few different ways of distinguishing between mindfulness and mindfulness with wisdom. And that's where, going back to the beginning, so I talked about relating to experience as experience. So rather than relating to what's happening as my knee pain or what I'm thinking about, there's less involvement in that way. There's less sort of personal involvement and a little bit more impersonal or more objective way of just seeing this is simply experience arising in the moment. So I'm just going to say a couple of things about, no, I'm not going to say no, maybe I won't. I'll say one more thing, which is, so how we know makes all the difference. If we're knowing with that quality of aversion, for example, in the mind, that really colours what's seen. If we know with the qualities of awareness in the present moment, then we know more clearly, and we've set up the conditions in the mind for, at some point, we can't know when, for wisdom to arise. Yeah, so the chapters in the book, particularly chapter 4, talking about right view, and chapter 7 talk quite a bit about wisdom and delusion and how to recognize both in the mind. It's no use just recognizing the moments of wisdom. That's helpful, that's important, but actually there are so many more moments of delusion, unfortunately. Most of us anyway. I just speak for myself. So learning how to recognize delusion as it manifests in the mind is really helpful. So I might say a couple more things about the book a bit later, but for now, let's maybe just have a moment or two, or a minute or two standing, just stretching the legs, and then just sitting in a way that's comfortable for meditation. This is seen in a relaxed way. And settling back, resting into the back of your body. And sometimes I say like resting into the big, comfortable old armchair, which those of you on Zoom might well be doing. This has become quite a literal practice instruction. For most of us, simply settling, resting in the back of the body. Letting the posture feel quite natural. No sense of strain. And you can have your eyes open or closed. It's very helpful for the practice to be able to use seeing. We're seeing most of the time, but most of the time we are not that aware of it. But eyes open or closed, and whichever it is, let the eyes relax, let them be soft. Where we're able to go with the eyes, the mind quite often follows, mind and body. Relax the eyes, relax the body. And the mind can relax a little bit. And the relaxation just goes as far as it can in this moment. We're with what feels natural. So you can choose where you want to rest the initial focus of attention. While body and mind are settling, you might just be aware in your body. Sensations of weight, areas of coolness and warmth, different vibrations, tingling. Whatever you notice in the body, that can be an area where you rest your attention initially. Or it could be with the area of sound. Working with the sense of hearing. But once we're a little bit settled, we can just open up to any of the senses, any of our sense experience that's available right now. Sensations through the body. Sensation connected with the breath, with sounds, and with seeing, either outer seeing or inner seeing. One way of doing this is to simply notice where your attention goes. Our attention is always moving from one thing to another. But often it's outside of our awareness of it. You might just find yourself, oh, I'm listening to that sound. Or, oh, I'm thinking about such and such. Or the attention's with the neck, which feels a bit stiff. So you can become more aware of how attention is always moving. And all we want to do is let awareness follow that attention. Let awareness accompany the attention wherever it goes. The attention can be like a butterfly just landing on a leaf, really delicately, lightly moving from one leaf to another, accompanied by mindfulness. as well as the physical senses. You can also include the mind sense. Noticing when thinking is happening. And seeing if it's possible to notice thinking without getting completely lost in the content. Just recognizing a thought as a thought. And notice if at any point you feel like you're reaching out towards experiences, particularly sounds. And see if it's possible to rest back again. And receive sounds or receive experience. Let the experience come to you. Every now and again, just reminding yourself to be present, remembering to be aware. And then notice what's happening in the present moment. every now and again, checking the quality of energy or effort you're using. And remembering that you need just enough to be able to be present. You might become aware of some sense of trying to do. And that's fine. And seeing if it's possible to relax back around that trying energy. Being curious about how it feels in the body and in the mind. And perhaps noticing if there's a sense of contentment or acceptance of what's happening in the mind or in the body. Can we be with what's happening, or is there some degree of resistance or not wanting something else to happen? Noticing that. Noticing wanting or not wanting in the mind is really helpful, useful information. And notice how you're relating to experience. You're relating to experiences simply as experiences. or something more personal. Something to identify with as me. Whichever you notice, that's fine. I mean, some degree of right view is working in the mind. Helpful Dharma perspective. And for the last 2 or 3 minutes of the practice, just tuning in really simply with the present moment. What is the mind knowing? Through any of the physical senses and the mind sense. And noticing any sense of enjoyment, enjoying the moment, and appreciating the mind and body for being willing to practice.